Welcome to the second episode about my 1953 Pontiac Chieftain. Today's episode will be just about the engine because I believe that this engine is quite interesting. I wanted to originally say unique, but I don't think it will be a right word. It's interesting because it has multiple design features which you have no chance to see in modern engines now, and so I think it's worth talking about that. So I will be mainly focusing on those differences. I will not talk about things which you can see in every engine, and hopefully you will like it. So let's look at the engine. Okay, here we go. The first difference is pretty obvious. I'm talking about the difference between now and back then in the 50s. You can actually see the engine. It's not full of covers, plastic covers, and so you can see actually all components if you look closely. Pontiac called this engine L-head inline 8, which is a self-explanatory. It's a inline 8 cylinder engine, and so in the very beginning I just want to give some specification. Bore of the cylinder it's 3 3/8. Stroke it's a 3 3/4 inch, which gives us a total displacement 268 cubic inches, which is about 4.4 liter. This engine with compression ratio 7.7 was able to produce 122 horsepower at 3600 RPM, and I think 227 foot-pounds of torque at 2200 RPM. Fuel economy, according what I read, was about 17 miles per gallon. And one interesting thing was mentioned that it required to add roughly 1 quart of engine oil every 1000 miles. Before I will show you a little bit more details, I will remove the battery. Obviously you see it's a pretty big battery, and it's important to say also that it's a 6-volt electrical system, which was pretty common till 1955, where generally everybody converted to 12-volt system. So I will remove the battery and we can look on the engine a little bit closer. Right, so battery is removed, so we can actually see better. Here in the front, this is the generator. It generates direct current, as I mentioned, 6 volts. It's quite long in comparison to today's generators, which is actually alternator, which generate alternating current. Behind that there is a distributor. You can see it better like this. It's a classic point ignition system with mechanical and vacuum advance. That vacuum advance, it's this part. It takes the vacuum from the carburetor and it's changing the advance of the ignition. In the corner you can see starter, and in my opinion the starter is one of those components which went through least changes during those 100 years which we are actually using the internal combustion engines. Here, this part this part. It's a part of the ventilation system. The air enters here through this hole into the crankcase, and also this cap, it's a cap which can be removed, and this is where you can add engine oil. Now if we look on the firewall, I don't know if it is really good view, but this one, it's a defroster. It's using the water, or actually coolant, coming from the engine. It comes through this hose, and then air is blown through this, and it's blown into the cabin. Behind that, this here, you see these two, it's actually better like this, you can see two fuses, and that's all what this electrical system has. It has only two fuses. And here on the firewall, let's say this one here, this is the regulator which is connected to generator, and it regulates the current going into the battery. On this side there is really nothing else. This part is the ground, this end it's connected to the battery normally, and it's the engine. Now let's look at the driver's side. Here, this one, it's an air cleaner. And it's another difference in comparison to today's air cleaners. This one is something which is called oil bath air cleaner. It actually has the certain amount of oil in it. It's in this portion of the cleaner, and air is entering through this gap, and it goes through certain labyrinth, and when that air is changing direction, those particles of, I would say dust or something which we do not want to go to the engine, because of the momentum, it kind of separates from that airflow and gets trapped into that oil. And once a while, I would have to look to the manual. You have to actually unscrew this bolt. It's and then you can actually remove the oil and put a clean one. It sits on the top of the carburetor. You can see that one. I will remove that cleaner so we can see the carburetor better. But before I get there, I want to point out this part, which obviously everybody knows. It's a fuel pump, but this one it's rather special. It has two diaphragms, and one diaphragm, which is here on the top, this actually works as a regular fuel pump. However, on the bottom here, it's another diaphragm, and that diaphragm is used to generate the vacuum, and that vacuum is used to actually run this little thing here, which is the motor for windshield wipers. So it's a interesting thing. It's a vacuum operated motor for windshield wipers. So I will remove this cleaner and show you a little bit more. This is how it looks like when I remove the air cleaner. You can see the carburetor. This carburetor is made by Carter. There were other companies, they were supplying the carburetors for Pontiac. This one, it's a two barrel, even so it's not really too obvious on the first look. You have to take my word for it. But if you don't want to, you can actually look here on the bottom and you would see these two screws. These are used to adjust the air-fuel mixture, and each of them is for one of those barrels. On the top there is an automatic choke here. It's operated by this part which has the bimetal, and that bimetal is like a little chamber, and that exhaust gases are brought to that chamber by this tube, and those gases are heating up that bimetal, and as engine is heating up, it's actually opening like that. Okay, it's cold now, so it's closed. This pipe is the part of that vacuum advance which I mentioned on the other side on the distributor. On the firewall there is a glass jar which is used for windshield cleaner, which was pretty typical in 1950s. It's made of glass. In 1950s they were using very little plastic on engine cars. Today it's a different story. Here you can see two big horns, and one more thing, it's a kind of interesting thing. You see this here, this pipe, it's a part of that ventilation of the crankcase. As I mentioned here, the air was entering through this hole, going down to that pipe into the crankcase, and air was exiting through this pipe to the atmosphere. It was the time when emissions were not issue, and so nobody really cared. Now I want to show you a few images. I found this image of the engine on the internet, and it's a pretty good picture. It's a view from driver's side. You can see generator, you can see distributor and starter, and on the top oil bath cleaner. This one it's a little bit different than I have on my car, but it gives you a pretty good idea about the size of the engine. Engine is 34 inches long. The head is 34 inches long, and it weighs quite enough. It weighs 750 pounds. This is a section view. I found this image in my textbook from the time when I went to school, and on the first look I thought that that's the actual engine which I have in my 1953 Pontiac Chieftain, but when I took a closer look I realized that's not the case. However, it's pretty close. When you look at this engine, it's a typical representative of 1930s, 1940 era. It pretty much became obsolete in late 1940s and early 1950s. Has a bunch of features which just indicate that. I labeled all those main components like crank mechanism, valve train mechanism, and those other parts. Engine block and engine head are made of cast iron. Crankshaft, camshaft, and connecting rods are made of forged steel. And pistons are made of zinc-plated cast iron. That's it, pretty much what it's not done anymore. You can also see here on the left bottom corner label which says oil pump, and that oil pump is sticking out of the engine. That is also not what you can see on today's cars. If you look on the very bottom, you would see that pickup tube which brings oil into oil pump. That doesn't reflect the reality what is on my engine. I will talk about that later. Talking about piston, as I mentioned, piston in my engine, it's a zinc plated cast iron. If you look on the bottom part of the image, you would see the contemporary design of a piston. What is typical for it is those compression rings and oil rings are located in the crown of a piston. That's mean above the piston pin. That image on the top, it more reflects what is in my engine. And difference is obvious. It's that oil ring is located under the piston pin. If you recall, when we were looking on actual engine, I didn't mention oil filter at all. Well, the reason is that it doesn't have it. Instead, it's using something which is called oil cleaner, and oil cleaner is located inside the engine. It's not serviceable. You cannot replace it like we do now, replacing the oil filters every 6,000 to 10,000 miles. If you would want to do that, you would have to remove that oil pan, and to do so, you would have to actually lift the engine. So it was not intended to be serviced. I don't have a good professional picture, so I kind of draw the sketch of this. And you can see I mark those main parts like an engine block. I kind of draw that labyrinth, how oil is being sucked into oil pump. And it works on the same principle as oil bath air cleaner. Again, it's changing suddenly the direction, and it's causing those heavy particles to separate from the flow, and they fall down on the bottom of this oil cleaner. Pontiac called this engine L-head inline 8, and it's due to the shape which is created by the combustion chamber and cylinder. And it's due to the fact that valves are offset from the cylinder. Here is the valve train. It's called SV valve train. It stands for side valve. It was widely used valve train till the end of 1940s, and it was so widely used because it was simple and reliable. However, as the development of engine went on, it just couldn't satisfy the demands for the modern engine, and so the reason why it got obsolete was that airflow is not favorable through the engine. It just forces what is called reverse flow, and today's engines, they have something like a cross flow, which is better. It doesn't have an ideal shape of the combustion chamber, and also it's doesn't like, and it's not even like a really possible to make a really high compression ratio. I want to mention a few notes about inline 8 cylinder engines. They are rare. As I know, nobody really makes them anymore for the passenger cars. Here you are looking at the crankshaft of the engine like that. Actually, this crankshaft is identical to one which I have in my engine. There is a few advantages of inline 8. First one and most important is it's very well balanced. The second is that it has large power stroke overlap. Ignition occurs every 90 degrees of the rotation of the crankshaft. Just only for the comparison, one cylinder has very low, I would say almost negative overlap because it fires every 720 degrees. Four-cylinder fires 180 degrees and six-cylinder every 120. So if it is firing every 90 degrees as this 8-cylinder, it results in a very smooth operation. For this reason, this engine runs 350 RPM at idle, which for comparison, today's engines, they run between 550, 800, some of them even more at idle. Of course, there are some cons. The first one, and probably the most important, is that crankshaft is very slim. It's long, so it's slim, and it's very flexible, and so for that reason it doesn't like high RPM and it doesn't like sudden changes in RPM. If you run these engines into a high RPM, it can actually lead to catastrophic failure. There is a problem with cooling with inline 8 engines. Those front cylinders, they just are cooled better than those rear ones. Of course, there is a provision which kind of negates that, but it's a complication. Also, air fuel distribution, it's a problem because of the different lengths of intake manifold. And of course, the space. Today's engines are placed into the engine bay sideways, and the 8-cylinder, if you remember this one, it's a 34 inches long, just doesn't fit. To demonstrate how smooth inline 8 engine could be, just look at the following video. I started this engine a while ago and just listen to it for a while. I think it's all for today, for the second episode. I will try to make a third episode much sooner. I guess everybody understands that if you have a house and some property, you have other priorities than to play. But I will try really hard. In the third episode, I will actually start doing something. I already know what I want to do, but I don't know yet exactly. So, okay, I will see you at the third episode. So have a great day.